Hey everyone, it's Matt here.
How's it going, everybody? It's your friend Will. Hope everything's going great with you.
Welcome back to another episode of Savants Tech Talk. In our past videos, we've received some comments from the developer community, such as yourselves, and some of you have actually brought up some interesting topics, and today we're going to discuss one of them. In the comments to one of our videos, people were asking about React Native versus Flutter.
Both of them are very popular among the developer community, and both are backed by big firms such as Google and Facebook. They are very active in terms of the open source community maintenance and support, and they can all be pretty quick to market in terms of prototyping, not to mention that they have great performance.
And also some of the differences between React Native and Flutter is that React Native is actually created by Facebook, and Flutter was actually created by Google. Also, Flutter is actually native, whereas React Native actually isn't. And also, Flutter uses Dart, whereas React Native uses JavaScript. So now we're going to discuss some of the pros and cons of both Flutter and React Native. We've actually gotten some feedback from the developer community, and we're going to share those insights with you. First, we're going to start with the pros of why someone would use Flutter. Now, usually Flutter is quicker to market, and you also don't have to worry about supporting older devices, and the apps are generally faster.
Number one, Flutter is quick to market, and this comes from different angles. Because Google developed such a powerful technology, and because they are the main support behind Android as an operating system. So the support from Flutter to Android is very seamless, and iOS in general is not a major issue for both React Native versus Flutter. So this means that if you write code with Dart and you use Flutter, the time it takes to build cross-platform mobile apps will be generally shorter. Some of the older version of Android devices, such as Android 5, will still have the same type of look and feel when it comes down to the mobile app that's being built. And also, Flutter uses the Flutter's engine, which is primarily written in C++. This provides a low-level rendering that can basically interact with the bare metal hardware. When it comes down to file and network I/O, as well as animation, just overall Flutter's core library is overall very performant. And also, most of the developers, when they program Flutter application, they tend to use the Flutter framework. That provides you a very beautiful foundational widgets for you to be able to build your applications.
So now that we've discussed some of the pros to using Flutter, we're going to discuss some of the pros of React Native. React Native actually already has a larger community because it's been around longer. Because it's been around longer, it's also more stable. And it also uses a very common language, JavaScript. Also, another big benefit of using React Native is that the developers actually get to choose the solution of their choice that best fits them.
That's right. Because React Native has existed for longer, there's a lot of big companies use React Native in their actual products. For instance, Uber Eats. For instance, when you're talking about Walmart, Tesla, there's a lot of big enterprise that are using React Native currently. And overall, it has a larger development community, a lot of developers coming up with very nice library that is easy to use. And it uses the similar type of syntax comparing to React. So if you're a React lover, which a lot of you are, you're probably going to have a good time with React Native. And because of this large collection of libraries, this large community, you got to really select whatever method or ways you want in order to design your own solutions. There's no really particular opinionated way of doing or developing your mobile app. Not to mention the same benefit that it shares with Flutter, which is one code base in two different platforms. Those are all benefits of using React Native.
Now that we've discussed some of the benefits, let's move into the cons, starting with Flutter. The first thing is that exactly unlike React Native, Flutter actually has a small community because their community is still growing, but right now it's currently a lot smaller than React Native's community. So currently developers need to custom script in order to be able to automate the building, testing, and deployment. And also, if Google happened to decide that they wanted to stop support, that would spell doom for Flutter. And lastly, one thing about Flutter is that the apps can be a bit too large.
As we mentioned earlier, because Flutter is kind of new, so it has a smaller development community behind it. And in terms of automating your tests and also building and deployment, a lot of it, you need to write custom script, and usually it can be very difficult and tricky to write those scripts. Sometimes involves a decent amount of manual intervention. And also, right now, the biggest backer of Flutter is Google. Even though it is released to open source community for usage, a lot of the engineers who are working on the Flutter core are actually Google engineers. So if Google were to pivot or put very little focus on it, it can really hinder the community support for Flutter. Whereas React Native is now largely maintained by the community as a whole.
Lastly, now that we've discussed the cons of Flutter, let's move into the cons of React Native. The first downside to React Native is that it's less plug and play. And as mentioned before, it's not really native. And lastly, in the community, there's also many low quality libraries.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the plug and play part, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. React Native tend to give you the same type of freedom that React allows you to have, which is you get to select your own type of library. So if you program Angular and React, you know the differences, the similar things apply here. Whereas Flutter try to enforce some of the best practice by giving you some level of opinionated framework to help you work with some of the issues and difficulties in the beginning. React Native sort of gave you a lot of freedom, right? It's like, okay, you can use this in whatever way you can. You can use what kind of library you want to use. We're not going to be enforcing anything on you. This type of approach really gave a developer a lot of freedom to experiment. But on the flip side, if you're new to this, it becomes really challenging because it's less plug and play. You got to set up more things in order to be able to write a solid program. And it isn't really native in the sense that you're using JavaScript to call some of the native code in order to have it complete certain actions, such as retrieving file or input/output, right? And also, because it gives you a lot of freedom and there's a large development community out there, you have a lot of libraries you're choosing from. And because of that, many libraries are just bad. And you won't know it's bad until you're much later down the stretch and you realize you're under pressure to finish the product, but some of the libraries are just giving you troubles, right? And the ways to overcome that is you just have to be experienced. You just have to make sure that you already have worked around some of the issues that are commonly seen in certain libraries, and you know which libraries to pick from. And that is not easy as a developer who is just introduced to React Native.
So now that you know the pros and the cons of both React Native and Flutter, you're probably wondering, which one do we use here at Fintelics?
Well, I mean, we do experiment a lot with Flutter, but when it comes down to build production-ready solutions, we normally use React Native. And the reason for that is pretty much like what we mentioned about. Flutter is great in terms of its performance, in terms of its capability and functionality, as it shows a very promising future. But so far, the bigger support behind the framework or the library is obviously React Native because it's been around for longer. There's more documentation, there's more community support, there's more people in the market who have worked around who have worked with React Native for production-ready solutions. So because of that, our team primarily uses React Native for cross-platform mobile development. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't develop a application with Flutter. As Google Trend shows, Flutter is becoming more and more popular. And in the next several years, we'll see more and more bigger company adopt Flutter.
So there you have it. Those are some of the key differences and similarities between Flutter and React Native.
And we also told you what we use in our company when it comes down to building a production-ready solution.
Do you still have questions to help you decide if you want to use React Native or Flutter? Let us know in the comments down below. We're more than happy to answer any questions you may have. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give the video a like. And don't forget to subscribe for more great content.
And more importantly, don't forget to stay happy and live happily. Bye.